Radio. The views expressed here are those of myself and do not necessarily reflect the views of Kazoo staff or board of directors. The phone number is 375-3082. Hang in there and you'll get on the line. Hello, you're on the line.
Hi, Mae.
Hi.
Did you see the article in today's Mercury? It was on page 8B. The guy spoke in Glendale. He was the Birmingham church bomber of 1958, and he spoke at a white supremacy meeting, a very large one. They had a skinhead riot against protesters there. But
where was the meeting?
Pardon?
Where was the meeting?
It was in Glendale, California,
okay.
A day ago or so.
What was his name?
I forgot his name, but he was famous for bombing the church in Birmingham, Alabama.
Was it Stoner? Was it Stoner? He travels around, because if Joseph Franklin is in jail, he also bombed it. There were about 5.
Yeah, it was in the, if you get your today's Mercury, it's on page 8.
It's outside in my car. You want to wait?
No,
no, it's in my mail back. I'm not going to run out.
Yeah, well, anyway, it's easy to find. Okay, he is a leader in the international Nazi movement, and what he said in Glendale, he said a very important thing. He says, in a few years in the United States, there won't be any blacks or Jews in this country, and they asked him why, and he said, God has germ warfare. He's given us germ warfare.
Okay.
That's quite a statement. I think we got a little window on what's being planned. Of course, you and I know that's a very tiny window.
Well, when I wrote the SLA is the CIA, in 1974, I said that Reagan and Mises creating with the FBI and Defense Department, the SLA, was similar to shooting the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of World War III, and that the way that they would wipe out people would be germ warfare.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was only 13 years ago that it was very obvious this is what they were going to do. 13 years they've done.
Yeah, but getting it in the public before the American press, that's been suppressed, as you know.
Yes.
Yeah, because remember what Zbigniew Brzezinski said. He says, with chemical warfare, ethnic drugs, how many Russians can I kill? And then someone said, oh, you mean the Soviet Union? And he said, no, just Russians. Remember that statement by him? That was under Carter years.
Yes, yeah. Well,
CBS News tonight had a whole story on the skinhead Ku Klux Klan Nazi alliance and what they were doing. It was quite revealing. They had a little clip of Tom Metzger saying, well, we don't want to have to use violence. You know.
Yeah, well,
but we will.
Goodbye, everyone. I'm leaving. Sorry to leave you. I'm going away. Yeah, I'll tell you, I didn't have time tonight because I didn't want to break up the Judge Ginsburg story, but there was an article last week about, in Kenya, there was a story that the Ku Klux Klan had put, I think it's like 60 million, at least 60 million or 40 million, into overthrowing 6 countries in Africa.
Yeah.
And I had already cut out from the newspaper 6 countries, 5 or 6 that had coups in the last 2 weeks. Did you know that? There were 5 countries that had coups in the last 2 weeks.
Wow, that's quite a matchup there.
Yes, it matched exactly. And Kenya immediately threw out the American nuns and people from the church who they said missionaries, because they said they were part of the operation. Yeah, so I'll try and do that next week, because there is unlimited money salted away. I've talked about it for years, and they can pull this in 3 to 4 years. They have the money, they have the germs, and it can be done.
Yeah, or just the spraying of chemicals from airplanes, you know, that would kill off certain ethnic groups.
Yeah.
They don't even need germs. They have that program set up.
Well, this is a very nice story.
One thing with it, I want to get to touch on it before I go. I want to touch on the Douglas Ginsburg thing. Is the Nazis and the conspiracy are using this now to bring recriminations on people who are part of the hippie movement, who use drugs, or in the youth rebellion, so that the recriminations can come and they can continue persecuting those people that they have files on from back then and get the public stirred up against them so that they can bury anything good that came out of the 60s and get their 1950s normality.
Exactly, because
back in power.
Exactly, and that's the point I was trying to make, is that when people caught on to what Ginsburg, like this dating service, the Better Business Bureau, and what went on, then they swung it to the grass and said, well, now if he sacrifices his judgeship because of the grass, then anyone else who had it can't have a high public office, and it wasn't the grass that he was kicked out for.
Right, yeah, he was an agent provocateur.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then they turn it around and say, well, he's paid his dues, so therefore, Judge so-and-so, you can't ever be on. You smoke a joint? Oh, you're not qualified. If Ginsburg gave it up, you have to give it up. And it wasn't the grass smoking that was the problem. It was the absconding with $10,000 out of a company that has a $50,000 bankruptcy, and also working with Chase Manhattan, advising while he's teaching law, and his conflict of interest with the communications. There were a whole series of things to investigate on him, but if anyone caught on, they blamed the grass.
You know, that agency that he set up with the CIA, the matchup. That's part of a plan that's being formulated secretly by the U.S. government called the National Pairing Agency. And what they're doing is it's this national Lebensborn breeding program they're trying to set up in this country to match up genetically superior people so that they can make their new Nazi race continue on that.
Absolutely. I was at the video store over at Rio Road where they there's a shop there that just has tapes, videotapes on things to do and how to do it. I don't know how many listeners have ever been in that shop. It's right next to the Monterey Bakery, right alongside of it. And I went in there to get some catalogs yesterday, and on the shelf there was that video on the Lebensborn that was on television one time.
Oh, yeah.
And I bought it right away.
Yeah, because I called up right after that was on and we talked about it.
Yeah, and it's hard to get it, so maybe some evening I'll set a date, and because I want to look at it again in terms of those preschool nurseries and what they're doing to the children and abuse of children.
Oh, yeah.
And I just grabbed it yesterday and bought it, so maybe I'll set an evening if people want to see what I'm talking about, the Lebensborn. Maybe listeners send a postcard in a self-addressed envelope, and I'll set some evening, or wait till after the first of the year. Things are busy now, and then we'll if people want to see it, I'll share it with them.
There was a black and white movie made about the breeding camps in Germany.
Yeah, this is the one.
No, there was a black and white one. This was made in the late 40s or early 50s.
Uh-huh.
And it was on TV once, and boy, they sure don't let that one come up.
Oh, I thought that's what I bought. It's on the Lebensborn on the 10 or 20,000 genetically superior children that were bred.
At least that many.
Yeah, thanks for calling.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Well. The skinheads and the germ warfare, yeah, I believe they can do that. I've seen it, as I say, for the past 13 years. 375-3082. I might mention, I was told, I didn't hear it, but Paul Harvey on KGO, which is an ABC station, did about 10 minutes on Michael Aquino, the Presidio School and his links to West Point, and the occult. And Paul Harvey, the very conservative newscaster, said, and this is what I was told he said, I have to get a transcript of it, that 1/5 of all the missing children in California have been eaten. I know that these people were saying children watched other children's limbs cut off and parts of them eaten in front of them. This came up at the conference in San Francisco, and this cannibalism has been suggested over again in lots of articles I have, but it didn't identify them as part of groups, but limbs severed and people cooked on stoves and in ovens, etc., etc. But this is what Paul Harvey was saying, so now I have to find the source of that pleasant information. And Geraldo Rivera had an hour on the occult. I'll do more next week on that. After 20 minutes, he was so shocked and dismayed, he didn't put it down, but he suggested that people listening screen their children or be careful who's listening if they have a soft stomach or whatever, because there were graphic details of what people are doing to people in the United States. And it's, like I said before, I was physically sick a week ago Monday after coming home from San Francisco. It's the first time I think I've ever been sick because of a situation related to the research. As soon as I talked it over with Barbara Honegger, we went up to the conference together and we talked about the material, and by Tuesday or Wednesday morning I realized and faced up to the fact, as I believe your mind causes your body to react in these ways, and tried to find out myself if that's what was causing it, and then realized it was, and then all the symptoms went away. And I'm able to deal with it, but it is pretty bad stuff. 375-3082. Call now. Don't wait till the end of the hour when it's all busy. What are your questions? What did you see this week There's been some very interesting television programs, and also about the Iran-Contra hearing, the descriptions of the president with his various, what they call inadequacies, not that he was a hands-off, but that he was almost purposely doing the things that happened under his own administration, knowing what he was doing, which is a pretty bad presidency, but that was all visible when he was governor, if you wanted to know it. Oh, incidentally, before I go further, for this hour I forgot to mention, I'll say it now, that the views expressed here are those of myself and do not necessarily reflect the views of Kazoo's staff or board of directors. Now, call in. I'm waiting for you to call and tell me what you're thinking about. I had the second potluck Saturday for listeners to Kazoo who subscribed at the last pledge. It was really nice to meet all of you. I really enjoy having you in the home. I hope you enjoyed it as much, and it gives me a chance and you a chance to just share some time together and meet those people who listen to the program, and it's very nice. I enjoy it. Hope you did. And again, thank you for subscribing to the station. As long as there isn't a phone call, in case you didn't hear the first hour, I'll tell you again that there's a food drive taking place tomorrow from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. at Valstro, Ford Lincoln Mercury in the parking lot. This is a community food drive for Family Resource Center, YWCA, Domestic Violence Shelter. Drop off food or donation for Thanksgiving. If you want, call Pamela Vaughn, 899-5095. Okay, so all of you get up early. If you work, get over there about around 8 or so and leave something off. And the markets are open 24 hours now, so it's easy to do that. You don't have to wait for something to open. I'm waiting for you to call. I want to hear what you're thinking about, so get on those lines. If not, I'll read some of the headlines from the Iran-Contra story as it broke last week. I take a lot of papers, so if you just read the Monterey Herald or the San Francisco Chronicle, sometimes you don't get a cross-section of what some of the other papers are saying. I'll just do them in the order that they came out. Just the first day it broke on the 19th or the 20th, not in any special newspaper sequence, but a pile of newspapers that I had. These were the various headlines. President let zealots subvert the law. I had that with you before when I asked what gives him the right to choose a new justice or two of the Supreme Court. Report won't hurt Reagan, the experts say. Don't you wonder who the experts are? They brainwash us that it won't tarnish off on him, and I'm sure it won't. He seems to be hanging in there. Another, Fawn Hall removed the wrong papers. Somebody suggested that she may have taken some of the cash out of the safe, but they had over a month to do that. Headline, Independent Counsel's investigation is breaking new ground. Computer diskettes from the National Security Council staff, they're still searching for those, and there is a ton more stuff. He's looking into the illegal private armies that operated on the side. Reagan faulted in inquiry, and this is different than the Tower report. Israeli middleman made as much as $700,000. As much means as it could go up to millions, but he made at least $700,000. Report says raids of Reagan hindered the investigation. Well, Casey was dead. Mr. Fortier of the National Security Council was dead. Admiral Moreau of the NSC, and papers were destroyed from October through November. And how else could you help an investigation with Casey and the others gone? So it says the aides hindered the investigation. They literally practically stopped the investigation. Another New York Times article, Constitution principles violated. Doesn't this really demand an impeachment, and they didn't even think of impeaching him? Another, Meese may have tried to hide his role in ransom plan, and I mentioned the Meese one before. Another headline, Iran-Contra panels went far beyond the inquiry by the Tower board, and that headline suggests that the Tower board said that Reagan was laid back and that his underlings did all of this, and the new report said if he didn't know then what his NSC advisors were doing, he should have, and they actually believe he knew, but there was no, what they call the smoking gun, which is probably rusting at the bottom of the ocean or something. the gun they were looking for doesn't exist, and that's some people's excuse. Now, I expect you to call in 375-3082. I'll give you the number to call Kazoo. That is the number here. And this is Mae Brussell. I want you to call in and tell me what you're thinking of, but if you don't, I'll read you headlines from last week's the Iran-Contra report that was presented to us on Wednesday. Another headline, White House strategy, ignore the report and hope the impact fades away. The other one says it didn't hurt Reagan, and one says they hope it fades away. Another headline, Iran Gate panel rips the administration. They're worded differently, but the message is loud and clear. Another, all logic points to Reagan being fully informed on Iran arms sales scandal, if not actually running the whole thing. And that was November 19th. Another, scandal probers the report hits Reagan and Meese, and again, how can they appoint the justices of the Supreme Court with his track record? If he's not impeached, at least the power should be out of the hands of Meese to select who the next judges are. They've selected over 200 judges around the country, and they're putting them in young, so they'll be there for the next 60 years, or at least 50 years, and they're putting in the Meese philosophy, the Reagan philosophy, and this spells trouble, just like Judge Ginsburg was on the court that decided Hakim's 8 offshore businesses didn't have to be exposed. Now, I'll go on some more headlines. I've got a lot of them, but I'm waiting for you to call tonight, 375-3082. I've never seen such a quiet board. I'm wondering where you are, you listeners. You better call in, or I don't know what you're doing tonight. We don't compete with the ball games because my listeners don't listen to the ball games. Then some more reports. Iran Gate panel rips the administration. Oh, maybe I gave you that one. Another, Reagan aides, according to Marlin Fitzwater, say that the report is just an opinion. Not much new here, mostly subjective opinions. That comes out of the White House of Marlin Fitzwater. I don't know where they find these people. Another headline, San Francisco Chronicle, new revelations on who really got the Iran money. And there's diagrams, and under the subtitle is flagrant violation of Constitution, raising more than $10 million from wealthy conservatives to do what the Boland Amendment said couldn't be done. They referred to it as a flagrant violation of the Constitution. Another story, one day after the scandal report, White House bars reporters, and there's a picture of Reagan with Yitzhak Shamir. Say, incidentally, that first call who called in, maybe your phone is off the hook and you're tying up the line. We only have one line here, so you better go look and see if the phone got put back on the hook, because that can happen, and one person can have it off, and then no calls can come into the station. So we'll allow for accidents, but maybe check and see if your phone is back on the hook. It could tie up the board for the rest of the evening. Another headline, San Francisco Examiner, 600 pages of cautious blame. And they do take into account the late Casey being gone, but not all the other people that are gone. Another headline, Panama's offer to Oliver North to undertake sabotage and possible assassinations in Nicaragua for the Reagan administration. And this is a long article about murders planned with the help of Panama that would do them for North, and the operations they described didn't work, but I'm not sure how many didn't work. As a matter of fact, a Mr. Spadafora, who lived in Panama, was murdered in Costa Rica. The blame has been put on Noriega, and I believe it was done by in Costa Rica. There have been articles saying that Robert Owen and John Hall, who had the ranch there in Costa Rica, still has it, were behind the killing of Mr. Spadafora that would blame Noriega for the murders. And here we have some Panamanians, not Noriega, making deals for murders and sabotage with Oliver North, and that's important. Another editorial, San Jose Mercury, in summary, Reagan failed. The Iran-Contra scandal resulted from a breakdown of leadership, not of laws. Well, they skirted laws and rewrote laws, and the leader was behind. The editorial doesn't want to think laws were broken, because then they would impeach Reagan, and nobody wants to go through that trauma. So there's a cover-up of one headline says laws were clearly broken, the other says not. Another headline, final Iran-Contra report refuses to exonerate Reagan, L.A. Times. Another one, Shamir, who was visiting with Reagan at the time the report came out, defends Israel's role in covert arms sales. Well, Israel started sending weapons to Iran in 1981. That was part of the 1980 hostage deal that it would be too obvious if we were arming over the table in 1981, and in return for assuring Ronald Reagan's presidency. So Israel took the role, and that was quoted, those quotations about the arms for Iran were in the Boston Globe in 1981, and Shamir defends his role, and one of their agents or more got over the $700,000, which could be many dollars more. So that's just the bottom line. Another headline, a disdain for government seen as a cause for the problem. Now, why do I enjoy these headlines so much? When I started World Watchers, my program, in 1971, Reagan was still governor for 3 years. And I was hitting at Reagan for just the very reasons that these headlines are stating now. Incidentally, last week we had trouble with the board and that clicking sound when the calls were coming in. And just as I left and went downstairs, the engineer was in front, just got out of his car, and he said, how'd everything go? And I explained the clicking, and he said that they were having trouble with the board and that he would fix it. He came to fix it when Kazoo went off the air at midnight. Last Monday, the clicking was beyond my control, the red and green loud clicking that went on sporadically. Once before, we had 2 calls, and then from the second call on, I couldn't hear the third. Nothing was changed at the board, so I think it's kind of interesting that after 1 call this evening, there are no calls coming in. I'm sure there are. Somebody must be calling the station to check out the number. I don't want to be told later there was a busy sound, and that after the first call, the phone was kept off the hook. Maybe the person who made the first call should call again to make sure the phone rings. Call back, because you usually listen to the full 2 hours. Call back this same number, Kazoo, and see if you can get the call through. We'll do a little test of ours and see if the phone rings, if the person who made the first call about the Nazis in Glendale and the biological warfare and so forth, pick up your phone and try to see if you can get through. If not, we know that 1 call came through and the others aren't coming through, because if this person tries, she wouldn't have any trouble getting on. The line isn't busy. And it'll be interesting to know if how many weeks in a row there is trouble here, which is not at the board. The call came through like before, and then the calls aren't coming in. Remember, once there were calls coming in and I couldn't hear them, we all heard the first call that was both way and clear, and it'll be interesting to see why a telephone call isn't coming through at this time. Somebody could have called as a second call and then kept the phone off the line, which would stop the other calls from coming in. But May is not short for words, and I'll share those articles with you about the secret team of the San Francisco Examiner story. I can get to that and read it to you instead of waiting till next week. I just did want to run down some more of these headlines. I relish them. They're not from the same paper. These are all different newspapers, different editions, because I was calling the shots for Reagan a long time ago. Edwin Meese had a long article, a top story. Meese says there's little new in the Iran-Contra report, and what came out before, if he says there's nothing new, was scandalous. One thing that I know is new is 1 page of Ollie North trying to get Mr. Rosa, the former president of Honduras, out of jail in Florida, where he was locked up as a drug dealer, and it involves making a deal for $10 million in narcotics that he's going to pay someone to kill the current president of Honduras. And Ollie North and the Justice Department were working like mad to get him out of the jail in Miami. The drug dealer, the would-be assassin, the Honduran official who's locked in the clink in Miami, and this is the president who says just say no to drugs, who has a person locked up who was involved with a $10 million deal, and assassination and death come all through this report. The Panama case and this Honduran case, there's 1 page in the report, I understand. Now we have somebody here. Wait, come on in and see. The line is busy? Okay, a friend who listens to World Watchers every week somebody called the phone and then took it off the hook so no calls can come through. Oh, no, nothing has changed. That's what I figured happened, because I asked the person who made the first call to call in. See, if they keep it off the hook, there's nothing I can do. They can call 375-3082. If they call, it lights up. But if somebody took it off the hook, then they can't get through. The first call came, and that person would call back. She would call back, but she can't get through. Thanks for coming over. What do you think of that? A friend who lives in PG came over. What do you think of this? Do you think this? Oh, no, there's nothing. Do you think this is going to happen every week now?
I hope not.
I hope not. It would be a good pattern to stop people from calling in, because the talk show is a very good part of the program where people learn a lot, like that first call, the meeting in Glendale, the germ warfare, and then it's cut off because we're not supposed to know those things. Well, you know. Thanks a lot. Somebody that lives in PG came over here to say the line is busy, so I'll continue to share news with you, and let's hope that the talk show part of this program isn't locked up by somebody doing this. I think somebody, when I had the talk show a few weeks ago, hinted that something could happen like this. I don't recall, but I believe that there was a suggestion that it would be possible, that it came to my mind that this could happen. Well, if the phone is off the hook, I, as I say, am not at a loss for words, and I'm going to read you the article by Louis Traeger from the San Francisco Examiner, Friday, November 20th, 1987, called "The Iran Reports Omissions," that I mentioned. The assassination plots, the drugs, and the 80 arms deal are barely mentioned. And it was Barbara Honegger's work, somebody who lives right here in Pacific Grove, who has sent about a 15-page resume, now it's 30 pages, to members of Congress, to the news media, to public officials. She's done a three-way talk show with the former president of Iran, Bonnie Sadr, in Paris, and she did it from telephone here in PG, to a New York station, WMCA 3-hour, with Mansour Rafsadeh, the former head of the SAVAK and head of the Iranian government at the United Nations, representing the UN at the United Nations. One former president, one the head of the SAVAK, who has a book out on the subject, and Barbara Honegger, and this is one of the cover-ups of this committee. The article says the Iran-Contra report, the most comprehensive official account likely to be written, the official account, barely touches on three of the most explosive issues raised by the scandal. Did the U.S. Contra support network participate in plots to assassinate a renegade Contra leader, Eden Pastora, and a conservative U.S. diplomat, Louis Tams from Costa Rica? How deeply have the Nicaraguan rebels been involved with cocaine and marijuana traffickers? And how much did the Contra support network of CIA Director William Casey and National Security Council aide Oliver North know about all this? Several drug traffickers have said the rebels just couldn't say no to dope profits. Some say the drugs were imported into the United States on the same planes that made illegal arms deliveries. Did Reagan's campaign officials make a deal in 1980 to supply Iran with military equipment to prevent Jimmy Carter's re-election from benefiting by the return of U.S. hostages? A former Reagan campaign worker and the Iranian president at the time say yes, indeed. The campaign worker is Barbara Honegger. The president is Bonnie Sadr, living in Paris. Those accused of these charges have denied all these allegations, of course. The report of the House Select Committee probing the Iran-Contra scandal sheds little light on the subject. Now, the chief counsel, Arthur Lyman, was and acknowledged is the lawyer for Robert Vesco. That was in all of the newspapers. Vesco is heavily involved in the narcotics traffic in Costa Rica. The property that he had is used by John Hall. He's involved in the political assassinations of the past and with William Casey, whose activities have been written up in many books, including Spooks by Jim Hogan, and also a partner with Casey, and Casey was active in the 80s with Edwin Meese in helping to steal the elections with Richard Allen. Allen was a partner of Robert Vesco and William Casey. So Arthur Lyman had a vested interest as the attorney for Robert Vesco, not going into assassination drugs in the 1980s, which are linked to these operations. This article continues. Those accused, I read that, have denied these allegations. The people who studied the House Senate Committee on the Iran-Contra scandal said it sheds little light on these three subjects. And those are the three main subjects that I've done my research on: the assassinations and the way assassination elections are affected. And 1980 was another electoral process that didn't take bullets but used the payoff of the Iranians and the illusion of Ronald Reagan being able to handle the hostages and bring them home, whereas he was cutting deals and giving them our very important military equipment. I would say it is a whitewash, said Leslie Coburn, a CBS public television news producer who recently wrote Out of Control, a book on the scandal. Now, Leslie Coburn is getting full-page ads in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal on this subject. She's married to another journalist who's on television a lot, and I believe the daughter-in-law of Alex Coburn, who used to write Village Voice. He writes for Nation, and in these times, it is a political family that writes and exposes these crimes all the time. And surprisingly enough, she gets this publicity in the major media, breaking through the way Jonathan Whitney has done with Wall Street Journal and exposing these cover-ups. Her book is getting a lot of attention. Peter Kornblue people involved in assassination plots, the subjects of World Watchers, of course. You name them, he said, they were part of Oliver North's team, as long as they were anti-communist and had something to offer the Contra resupply operation. Robert Havel, a spokesman for the House Iran-Contra Committee, said, we were to look into the sale of arms to Iran, and that sale only included, incidentally, 1985 and 86. He's only telling part of the truth. They were to look into the supply of arms to Iran and the Contra resupply. We think it's a thorough report. We don't think anything major is going to pop out. Now, they set their limits immediately. Meese wrote the periphery of the boundaries of 85 to 86, so the 80s arms deal wouldn't be included. So he says it's a thorough report of 1985-86. But what happened in 85-86 was based upon what happened in 80 and 81. Louis Traeger writes, attention now turns to the criminal investigation of independent counsel Lawrence Walsh. He's expected to seek indictments this winter of several participants of the arms sale and Contra supply. Now, Lawrence Walsh will take several participants. He will take the top ones, and then Reagan will pardon them, and the other ones will get off scot-free. This is what happened at Watergate. But the article continues. Walsh's investigators have interviewed witnesses with information on drugs and on assassinations, but the prosecutor is focusing on the diversion of money from the Iranian arms sales to the Contras as a criminal conspiracy. The very last thing that is ever investigated, this is May speaking, not the San Francisco Examiner, is the assassinations and the drugs and the stealing of elections. Just at Watergate, they didn't go into the deaths of 18 primary witnesses, 18 to 20, immediately after the Watergate story broke, and the murder of Dorothy Hunt on United Airlines, and the obvious deaths of very important people, one who transcribed the 18-minute tapes, and so forth. They went to money. You shake the money tree because that isn't sensitive. The bottom line is the killers and death squads in Argentina and El Salvador and the United States. The killers are let off. The bloodletters are let off. The money seems the only important thing. How did you divert the money? That's what Lawrence Walsh is going into. But this article says, if anything, any questions to these hanging questions may have to come from less prominent investigations by a lower profile congressional panel such as the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Crime, the Senate Foreign Relations Subcommittee on Narcotics and Terrorism that will hold public hearings, the Christic Institute, a liberal ecumenical law office in Washington, whose sweeping civil racketeering lawsuit against 29 people in the Contra Support Network will go to trial in 1988. And also from reporters for outlets such as the Miami Herald, the Boston Globe, the Examiner, political and legal weeklies, CBS, West 57th, which reported much of the information in this article. Now, a lot of people say, why do you do your research? The masses will never know about it. How do you get the people to wake up? And the minute I hear that stuff, I say, don't talk to me about the people, the people. I hang up on people on the telephone, people I meet socially. The people don't change the course of history. Certain people do, certain people that are energetic. The picture of Barbara Honecker and the article about her came from Alfonso Sciardi's article in the Miami Herald. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner who gave her credit for exposing Edwin Meese and Richard Allen and the deals that were cut out of the White House, the acting, soon-to-be White House during the transition periods and so forth. And it just takes a few reporters from the Examiner, the Boston Globe, the Miami Herald, CBS, to get these stories going. And Leslie Coburn, who wrote Out of Control, works for CBS. And with a little bit of exposure of dedicated, well-known writers and some not well-known and private citizens getting the facts out now, there is a way to broaden the investigation or inquiry. And this writer is saying we're going to have to depend on the House, Senate committees, the subcommittees, and institutions, private institutions like the Christie, and reporters. And this is where the muckrakers, the investigators, can give information to the reporters. The article continues, U.S. officials are barred by executive order from participating in assassination planning. That didn't stop the CIA from writing a manual for the Contras about neutralizing Nicaraguan officials and how to kill them. And the important part was that the manual told how to kill your own people to gain sympathy for your movement. By killing even the far right, you can blame the communists, and that's a technique that is used over and over again to blame the leftists. Then the article continues, a former Miami jailer, Jesus Garcia, and a soldier of fortune, Jack Terrell, have implicated the Contras, American mercenaries and operatives in the North CIA network in two specific assassination plots. And Jesus Garcia said that when he was planning to kill the heads of Nicaragua, this was for George Bush. This was George Bush's baby. I've had that on the air. That's what they said. Garcia spoke up in January 86 after he was charged with weapon offenses in connection to Contra support. The plot he reported was a bombing, the planned bombing of the U.S. Embassy in Costa Rica, the killing of U.S. Ambassador Louis Tams. It didn't occur. The bombing didn't occur after the plans to kill Eden Pastora. There were people who survived from the news media, Martha Honey and her husband Tony Abergan, and they hired Danny Sheehan, or Sheehan went to them and offered to defend them, and the Louis Tams killing never came off. This article says the politically conservative Tams was crucial to North's efforts to open a Contra Southern Front against Nicaragua, but the plotters wanted to collect a $1 million bounty from cocaine dealers in Colombia, where Tams was a U.S. ambassador later, and then pinned the attack on Nicaragua government forces. The Colombians were mad when he was ambassador there that he was hard on the drug dealers in Colombia, and the drug dealers in Colombia were working with Robert Vesco, Arthur Lyman's client, the chief counsel for the Iran-Contra affair, and two defendants in the Christic Institute, Mr. Pablo Escobar and Jorge Osha, are part of the Colombia cocaine racket. So they were going to let Colombian drug dealers who could hate Tams for being strict on drugs in Colombia make that be the cover story as an excuse to invade Nicaragua. Terrell told federal agents and journalists not only about a plot that was going to get Tams, but one against Eden Pastora that almost killed Eden Pastora. And this article continues on another page. Pastora was the leader of one of the Contra faction. In May of '84, he disobeyed a CIA order to align military commanders from the overthrown regime of Nicaragua dictator Anastasio Somoza. This long article has a picture with big black letters, assassination plots, and there's a picture of Tams and Pastora and Robert Owen. Then it's got another subtitle, Drug Trafficking, and a picture of Adolfo Calera and Jorge Morales and Rodriguez, the gentleman who brags about killing Che Guevara, who has access to George Bush's office. Then there's a deal for hostages, the former president of Bani Sadr, a picture of him and Barbara Honegger, a courageous woman in the middle of these slimy characters, except Bonnie Sauter is no saint, but he's trying to expose the 1980 deal, and Richard Allen. And those are big black letters. I say it takes up the entire page 4. Whoever took the phone off the hook and blocked this hour of your calling in didn't know that you would luck out and get an entire reading of this article, so you're not deprived of information. I usually bring in enough material for 3 continuous broadcasts in case I want to continue for 3 hours. And if you can take 3 hours to continue with this article. As Pastora was planned to be killed because he objected to the Contras being run by the former parties of the Nicaraguan dictator Somoza. At the end of that month, a bomb blast at Pastora press conference killed 8 people, and that is 8 murders we never hear about in the Contra compound where the Contras were surrounding this area where 8 people were killed. Those lives don't count for anything. I mean, they're just nothing. 8 people were killed. This bomb wounded almost 30. In sworn statements in the Christic Institute, 2 Costa Rica law enforcement officials were linked to the CIA operation of John Hall, the alleged bomber, though not to the bombing itself. Major parts of Garcia's testimony and Jack Terrell's stories have been corroborated by other former Contra supporters, one of whom has died, and that's Adler Barry Seal and also Mr. Carr in Los Angeles. There's 2 that knew about this that have died, one in L.A., one in Louisiana, and another of whom have disappeared. And a Mr. David knew about this on the ranch of John Hall, and he was killed on the ranch. So there are 3 people who've been killed along with these plans. Hall and North, their courier Robert Owen, also was named by Terrell in the Pastora plot of trying to kill Pastora. They have denied involvement, and last year Hall lost a lawsuit in Costa Rica to try and stop Martha Honey and Tony Abergan, who named him as part of the bombing. He lost that in his own country of Costa Rica. He's an American citizen from Indiana who lives down in Costa Rica, but couldn't, even with all the drug money and influence and assassins, affect the court against him. The congressional report discusses the alleged assassination plots just briefly in connection with a Miami federal investigation closely monitored by North and also this Edwin Meese's Justice Department, and the officials included Attorney General Edwin Meese in stopping the investigation of this. The Pastora bombing is the centerpiece of the Christic suit. The House Crime and Senate Foreign Relations Subcommittee have taken an interest in the alleged plots. Ask About Cocaine, a protester's banner, was shown during the congressional hearings. They were kicked out of the room when they opened up the banner, Ask About Cocaine. But the committee didn't. Last year, the Examiner was the first to report specific links between drug smugglers and the Contras. That was in the San Francisco Examiner, and now the congressional committees have subpoenaed the papers that link the San Francisco drug smuggling to the Contras and are going to put this in part of their investigation. And of course, it went right down Southern Air Transport and Contras and drug smuggling. It first broke in the Examiner, and now it's being put in the hands of congressional committees. Federal prosecutors returned 36,000 seized from cocaine smuggling in 1983 after leaders of a Contra faction said they had given it to smuggler to buy weapons. He said he had given the Contras hundreds of thousands of dollars from his drug profits. And Contra leader Adelfo Calero said last year that his dominant faction had been bankrolled by a Bay Area Nicaraguan exile described by federal investigators as a major cocaine smuggler. These are the people working with Nancy's friends, and Nancy is saying just say no, and these activities are going on with Oliver North and the National Security Council, and also not mentioned in the Iran-Contra hearings, but which came out later and they purposely covered up, was the buying of arms for the Contras from the largest drug suppliers in the Middle East, from Syria and Ali Kassar, whose home base is in Vienna, Austria, and the use of the well-known, well-financed multinational drug czar out of the Middle East. They're going into the drugs of the Iran-Contra in Costa Rica, because that involves the lawsuit of Martha Honey and Tony Abergan, and nobody has filed a lawsuit about the Middle East drugs, so it's narrowed down to that point. Incidentally, for those of you listening to this part of the program, my name is Mae Brussell, and the second part of World Watchers is a talk show, and somebody has conveniently called the phone and taken it off the hook so nobody else can call in. They get a busy signal, and it's interesting that that came right after the first telephone call of somebody who told us about a meeting of the Nazis and the Klan in Glendale, California, with a Nazi Klan leader who bragged or is known as a person who bombed the children in Birmingham, Alabama, who said no blacks or Jews will be in this country within a few years and that they will be killed by germ warfare. And after that call, the phone was evidently was called here before I could pick it up, just one ring and then taken off the hook. And so there's a busy signal this evening. Somebody came in to tell us there's a busy signal and you can't call in, but you're still not deprived of this information. I would like to put it on the broadcast next week for those who get a taped off the air copy of this broadcast that goes out to various people, but I won't repeat it again on that broadcast. You've lucked out, you Kazoo listeners, and I'll refer to it just briefly if people want to send for a copy of the article. Now this article it continues on with, this is a long article with a lot of information. It says George Morales is a powerboat champion, a cocaine distributor with a 16-year federal sentence. He told the Senate Foreign Relations about his narcotics traffic, and 3 of Morales' pilots confirmed the marijuana coming into the United States from Central America. And Ramon Milan Rodriguez, serving 35 years for racketeering, said that he gave the Contras $10 million through Felix Rodriguez, who's a key member of Oliver North's network, a protege of Vice President Bush's national security aide Donald Gregg, and so forth. And then the Iran-Contra Committee didn't even start the drug investigation. They couldn't drop it. And then this continues with the story of the elections. The Senate Narcotics Panel and the House Judiciary are pursuing those issues. We found some fairly disturbing links in Contra drug traffic, and it goes into the Israeli arms and sales and the early 1981 expose of Israel's arms to Iran that was disclosed in the Boston Globe in 1982, and they refer to that article. Also, the Reagan campaign had spies in the Carter administration, according to a 1984 congressional investigation of the Republican nominees' acquisition, confidential debate briefing papers prepared for Carter. The Reagan intelligence network was led by William Casey, who was deeply involved with Iran-Contra support. Campaign aides wanted to find out why about any October surprise involving the release of hostages in the U.S. Embassy in Tehran that were held captive through the last year of Carter's presidency. Bonnie Sarter, who was then president of Iran, has said that Richard Allen and 2 other Reagan campaign officials made a deal with Iranian representatives in early 1980. Iran would get future armed deliveries in exchange for refusing to release the hostages while Carter was president. And Barbara Honegger has been able to identify people who say that George Bush attended those meetings in Paris. And if this gets before the Congressional Committee, this literally will be the end of the George Bush career. The article says Allen and other Reagan campaign representatives at the meeting and the future National Security Advisor Robert McFarlane deny a deal was struck, but Barbara Honegger, a Reagan campaign aide, has said that in late October 1980, another staffer told her, and she was back there with the transition team, we don't have to worry about an October surprise. Dick Allen has cut a deal. The hostages were released on Reagan's inauguration day in January 1981. The Iran-Contra report disposes of the issue in just one teeny tiny little footnote. It says the committees were told that the Iranian approaches were rejected and have found no credible evidence to suggest that any discussions were held of agreements reached on delaying the release of the hostages or arranging an early arms for hostages deal. No official investigations are known to be pursuing of the issue, and they're wrong about that, and the author of this article is going to be called that there are, in fact, congressional committees looking into the issue. I'll give you the address again if you want to order from the government printing office your Iran-Contra report, and I don't know if it'll be the same small print that is in other editions, such as the New York Times. Right? Got a pencil? I'll give you a minute to get a pencil. Government printing office. Send $29. Mail it to the Superintendent of Documents, United States Government Printing Office, Washington, D.C., 20402. Phone orders may be accepted, 202-783-3238. You can even pay with MasterCard and Visa credit card, your plastic card, and you can find out about how your president and your attorney general and the National Security Advisor and the National Security Council and all these busybodies like Robert Owen were doing all their mischief, subverting the Constitution, breaking the laws. And also, if you want to wait until next month, and this is an interesting word, an abridged version will be issued in paperback next month by Times Book as part of Random House. They say it's an abridged version. Now, that is important. I bought the paperbacks and the street volumes of the Warren Report, and then I bought the hardbound for the government printing office. You could spend 9 years comparing them, as I did with the Warren Commission hearings and documents. I suggest if you at all can rub together that $29 or ask some member of your family for a Christmas present. I got my 26 volumes of the Warren Commission hearings in 1964 as a Christmas present. I would prefer, if I were you, getting the full version for $29 and giving up other books for a while than to get the abridged version for $9.95. So the peasants, the population at home who can't afford more, get an abridged version for $9.95, and if you can cough up your $30, you maybe can get the whole story that they chose to tell. Now, I am hoping that this little trick of tying up the line doesn't continue too long. I'm sure you must be filled with glee to be able to do this and keep people from calling in. I'll share another article for you for the remaining part of the program. If we had 5 lines, then the same people have 5 friends, and they would tie up the line. So maybe we should call the telephone company. Somebody might call the operator right now, or 611, or even the Pacific Grove Police. That's a suggestion if you want to do that right now. That has been done, and I've done that before. And tell them that 375-3082 is being held up, and ask them to trace where the telephone is coming from. They have the technology to do that, so I suggest that, and let them tell you they can't. I know they can. And if not, we'll call the phone company and have them be alerted to what happens next week when the talk show part of the program goes on. You listeners, call Pacific Grove Police and tell them that this line is being held up, and it cuts in with your First Amendment right for information, of being able to receive and disseminate information, that this is the form of a crank call. And if you get 3 consecutive threats or crank calls, and I consider this obstructing your rights, then they can put a tap on the telephone and tell you for sure you need 3. So if it happens 3 weeks in a row, they'll find it the 4th week. So jolly time. I'll just bring in enough material, because I never in a lifetime can share all the material I'd like to put on this program with you. So try and see if they can find it now. The phone is still off the hook, 375-3082. And if not, we'll do this for the next 2 weeks. And by the 4th week, we'll know who's calling in on this line and find out who that is. Now, I just have about 3 more minutes to share with you before the next program. I see Jim out there, and we'll turn on to some jazz in a moment. I began by saying that Seymour Hersh has written a 2-part story on the secret Army unit that aided the CIA efforts. Now, this is the merger, the wedding of the Army, the intelligence community, and the CIA with these secret operations under the Delta Force. The Delta Force is very important because That group were supposed to break up in 1980 after the ruined hostage rescue. The excuse for this force, and Seymour Hersh, the Pulitzer Prize writer, says that it began in the early 1980s because of the bungled special operations, the hostage rescue in Iran, and that force was set up, and money for those operations were put in a Swiss bank account. And when the operations broke up, the bank account was supposed to close, and the Pentagon didn't know about the Yellow Fruit, the code name operation that was run by same Willard Zucker that works with Albert Hakim and Richard Secord and Stanford Technology Trading Group. And separate operations, the secret team, the Junta, used the money from the Swiss bank accounts to have their special operations, and those could be used at home, the Delta Force, to act swiftly and quickly to come in conjunction with the Nazis and Klan. There's a long-range group and a combination working together for many years. David Emery and I myself have talked about the similarities in Germany of the Freikorps that seemed to be a separate operation, separate from the army and German whatever intelligence they had, that looked like they were on their own doing political assassinations, killing 400 political persons from the campus, from the press, from government, before 1933 when Hitler was officially in power. And then history proved that Freikorps were trained and worked directly with the military and looked separate. So the skinheads and the neo-Nazis and what I call the private armies, I have a category of research that I call private armies, which includes the Rangers, the SEALs, the Special Forces, the Delta Force, and their links to these secret operations and bank accounts. Well, I'll take a closing goodbye now, and I'm sorry about what happened to the telephone. Jim Bourne will be on with some jazz, and next week we'll see if we get through. If not, as I say, you'll have to bear with this for 3 more weeks, and then we can be sure to find out who did this. And in the meantime, I will call a telephone company and see if we can stop it at the end of the second week. This is Mae Brussell, and I'll be back with you next week to continue with World Watchers.
1 minute after 9 o'clock. This is KAZU, Pacific Grove, Carmel, Santa Cruz. Stay tuned for jazz.